Hello and welcome to another edition of Betting People. Today we have a really big international big hitter with us. We're hoping to have a few more names from outside the UK to bring to you. So I'm very pleased to invite and welcome Shane Anderson to Betting People.
Hello, William. Good to be with you.
And very good to have you here. Now, many of you who do know Shane will know him from his time, which he still does spend, being an integral part of the international racing discussion on Twitter, and of course his time talking about Australian racing as well. You're currently the Senior Director of Group Content and Brand at Better Collective. Tell us what exactly that does.
Yeah, I made the move to Better Collective, based in Copenhagen in Denmark, just almost 12 months ago. Better Collective's really doing some fantastic work, very much in the sports media aggregator space, a sports betting media group, for want of a better term. The business has been going since 2004. Jesper Søgaard, who's our CEO, and Christian Rasmussen, who is our COO, the two founders of the business, so they're still very actively involved. And I have responsibility for our major brand sites, sites like bettingexpert.com, that allow people to engage in sports, engage in tipping, and certainly take opportunities to link in with bookmakers for the best offers available. So it's been a really good experience. But as you touched on, I'm still very much a racing person through my blood. I love the sport. Doesn't matter whether we're racing in Europe, Australia, Asia, or the United States. It's an amazing sport and something I'm still passionate about.
Indeed. So let's go back to the beginning and let's ask, how did you get into racing in the first place?
Basically comes back to having parents and grandparents who loved going to the races. My father and I, particularly when I was very young, through to my sort of early and mid-teens, a key fun experience for us would be to go to the races on a Saturday throughout Australia, whether it be in Sydney, where I spent a bit of time growing up, and also in Melbourne, which is my home base. And from there, it grew into a real passion. I fell in love with a lot of great racehorses in Australia through the 1980s when I was a kid. And then that just kept building and building and building. And then lo and behold, in the sort of early to mid 2000s, some opportunities started to emerge. I was working very much in sports administration in those days, in the Australian Football League, and with one of the principal football clubs in Australia, the Melbourne Football Club. And from there, an opportunity opened up where I could be involved in telling the story of racing. And one of the links to get me in that was to focus heavily on international racing. So from there, close to 20 years ago, it's really blossomed, and it's been some of the best times of my life.
Fantastic. Were there any really big landmark moments that you feel made the sport go a bit more international? Because, of course, our viewers will be very familiar with some of the landmark Australian horses to come over, your Choisirs, Takeover Targets, etc. Can you name sort of one big moment that you really think sort of brought international competition more to the fore in both Australia and maybe the European race jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think there was a movement that really started to emerge when some big money came into horse racing globally, and it was predominantly through Robert Sangster and Coolmore and the Sheikhs when they started really investing heavily in that early 1980s period. It started to create this whole movement where there was a massive push for big prize money races. We saw it with the Japan Cup, which in many ways was the first real, truly international big money race. The Breeders' Cup followed from that. Then we saw in Australia it's almost a reconfiguration of what the Melbourne Cup was, our great race in Australia. All of a sudden, in 1993, became a truly international race. And to my reading, that win by Vintage Crop in 1993 really evolved the whole thinking of world racing, because a horse could be trained out of Ireland, go to the other side of the world, come out, win the biggest prize money race, be treated like a national hero, which Vintage Crop was. But it also then showed people that as we're moving into the modern day, you can transport horses in a better way than ever before. The prize money returns would be enormous. And people started getting behind it. And I think from there, we then saw Choisir go to Royal Ascot. We saw more international competition sort of emerge. Hong Kong with their big December fixture really started to take hold, and then some other movements through Dubai and Europe. So, but I think that big moment to me that really changed everything was the win by Vintage Crop in the Melbourne Cup in 1993.
Great moments there indeed. When you were sort of getting into the game, did you have any notable racing heroes who really stood out and inspired you during this time?
It's a really good question. I was blessed to get to meet, when I was first starting out, a champion jockey in Australia, Roy Higgins, who was a dominant force. He was partnered up with the great Bart Cummings for a lot of big successes. He won virtually every major horse race in Australia, and he had success internationally. But Roy made the transition from being an elite racing a sports person, to becoming a major media player. And when I first started out strongly in the media and was getting some really good opportunities, Roy was one of the biggest names around, and he basically picked up the phone and started having a proper conversation with me and said, look, I like your style, I like the things that you're talking about, but make sure you start thinking about this. And he opened up a lot of doors for me. He was a really integral player for me, and someone I derived a fair bit of inspiration from. But there were many others. I mean, there was a gentleman who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, Nick Collum, who was a big player in Australia. He helped me along the way. But all it really did was make me understand that I've got a passion for racing. I've got a platform and ability to tell the story. So make sure you do it right. Do your research. Make sure that you're covering all angles. Make sure that you're not always just bringing your opinion, that you're trying to get some sort of balanced coverage to what you do. But it all took off from there. But I've got to say, Roy Higgins was a major influence on me, and it was just fabulous that he was one of the first to really reach out and offer me some advice.
So with all that in mind, I'd like to know, did you ever get into betting during this time? And if so, what are some of your early betting memories that you have?
Yeah, certainly I've always loved to bet. And like most punters out there, you go through good runs and you go through bad runs. But I was always given the advice when starting out, follow your own beliefs. If you've got your own systems in play or your own theories in play, measure them to what is a proven system or a proven theory that's out there. So for me, I was very much looking towards ratings, because I think base ratings, particularly handicap ratings, and every jurisdiction's got them. In the UK, you've got your official ratings. In Australia, we've got a similar domestic system and so on. It can start actually giving you insights into, is this the right horse to be on? But I've tweaked things as I've gone through the journey, and as I said, sometimes I get things right, and sometimes I get things wrong. We've seen a big push in Australia. A lot of sort of analysis now is done around timing and sectional timing, and making sure that horses are travelling at certain speeds, or not overexerting themselves at certain stages to the races. You guys don't seem to have that level of analysis in the UK yet, and hopefully it'll be something that gets brought in, because I think it can really give you a significant edge. But for the jurisdictions like Australia and Hong Kong and the United States, where the vast majority of our racing tracks are flatter surfaces, and they're very round courses, having an in-depth understanding of ratings and also sectional times can give you a decent edge. I had a lot of luck in the early days, where, particularly when international horse competition was coming to Australia for our big races, I was using a lot of insights that a lot of people didn't have to help me find, my edge. I can go back to Torfin's Melody winning a Caulfield Cup in 1998, trained by Lady Herries out of the UK. I mean, started at 66 to 1. In my book, I had it at 12 to 1. So you're getting a significant overs. Horses like All the Good, again, a Caulfield Cup winner. The list goes on. It was just using the type of insight that you had and trying to convert that to what is available in your local area to try and see if you can get that edge that will hopefully lead to a good value result.
Absolutely, and I think that is a really good note upon which to end part one. Thank you very much for your time, Shane Anderson.